Hi, I'm Helen Beal, and today I'm going to be talking about using DevOps data to optimize value stream flow and realization. I'm Helen Beal, as I said. I am Chief Ambassador at DevOps Institute. I have a number of other roles as well, such as Chair of the Value Stream Management Consortium. I'm big into books. I read an awful lot, and I like doing research and things like that as well. So I'm delighted to share some of this work with you today. So the talk map for us, we're going to start by talking about that DevOps data and how that relates to value streams and what they are. And then we'll talk about flow, and we'll talk about realization through three different lenses. So the lens of the customer, the business, and the team. Then we'll link that to a conversation about DevOps tool chains and the value stream management platforms themselves. And then we'll finish by talking about how to use all of this to measure your progress in a DevOps journey. So first of all, let's talk about some DevOps metrics. Of course, these are extremely well known in our industry now. They're often referred to as the DORA metrics. They originated in the State of DevOps reports, and the science behind them is explained in quite some detail in the book Accelerate by the authors of the State of DevOps reports, Nicole Forsgren, Jez Humble, and Jean Kim. So you've broadly got four metrics, two metrics in two categories. So you've got your throughput metrics in green and your stability metrics in blue. So our green metrics are deployment frequency and lead time for changes. And what you can see here on the table is that different performers, so organizations that have higher performance, i.e. meet their targets in terms of profitability and revenues and their goals, are more likely to deploy more frequently and have a shorter lead time for changes. Our stability metrics, so MTTR, or time to restore service, so MTRS, and change fail or change failure rate, also have correlations with performance, organization performance. So higher performing organizations have a shorter MTTR, it's quicker for them to fix problems, and they fail less frequently as well. These are very commonly used, but they're by no means the only metrics. And when we're talking about value streams, it's worth thinking about some different metrics. But before we talk about those metrics, let's have a think about what value streams are themselves. So where I learned to do value stream mapping was very much from Karen Martin and Mike Ostling's book here, Value Stream Mapping. And as they say, if you can't describe what you are doing as a value stream, you don't know what you're doing. I often describe a value stream as anything that delivers a product or a service. And value streams conceptually have been around for a really long time, at least since the mid-20th century, the 1950s, with work that came out of Toyota and with Deming and people like that. However, our application of this type of lean thinking, and this all comes from lean, value stream work, to the software development lifecycle or our digital products is much newer. In the DevOps handbook, they say, in DevOps, we typically define our technology value stream as the process required to convert a business requirement into a technology-enabled service that delivers value to the customer. So what we're saying is, what we're understanding here is the end-to-end flow, and it's normally a number of processes. So it's a mistake to call it an end-to-end process, because it's normally lots of processes that are connected together, but they take us from idea to realization. So ideation to realization, the moment a requirement starts to form itself to the moment that that idea is realized in terms of value in the customer's hands. So if we're thinking in that way around value streams, there's some different sorts of metrics that we might want to think about. And when we do value stream mapping, the first metric we really collect is the cycle time. And we do that by estimating our touch times, the time it takes elapsed to do any part of the process in the value stream, and then the wait time or idle time, so the between the step time. And then we add our touch time and idle time together, and we get cycle time. And this is very similar to our flow velocities. This is telling us how long it takes us typically to get a new feature to our customer in our product and for them to receive the value in it. We can also look at other things like flow distribution. So there's 4 types of work in this, this suggested set of metrics, and I should tell you more about the source as well. So the source is TaskTop, specifically Mick Kirsten, Dr. Mick Kirsten, the CEO of TaskTop, and he wrote this book that you can see on the left here, Project to Product. And the flow metrics are very much coming from this work that Mick's been doing over many years now with many customers. So these 4 types of work: features, defects, risks, and debts. We can see what proportion of these types of work we have in our value stream flow, and that tells us quite a lot about what's going on during that period of time that we're working. So if we've got a lot of debt, for example, we might be trying to pay down a lot of debt to increase stability. We may be happier later if we see that we're actually dealing with more features. We may monitor defects. Defects are a tricky one because we kind of don't want 0 defects, because things do happen when you're developing things. Things always go wrong a little bit, but you also don't want too many of them. You also want to know that they're being dealt with. So there's lots of interpretation that needs to be done around these metrics. But using these metrics, so the flow velocity, efficiency, the time, and the load, so the load's very close to WIP, so how much work we've got in progress. Using all of that helps us understand things about our business, so how much it's worth, how much it's costing us, helps influence quality, and helps influence delight or happiness with ourselves at work, and also our customers receiving our work. So that's great. We've learned a bit about DevOps metrics. We've learned a little bit about value stream and flow metrics. Let's talk about realization then. So these things that are happening in the customer's hands. So lots of people talk about KPIs and OKRs. I'm going to talk specifically about OKRs here. KPIs and OKRs do normally work hand in hand. But let's just talk about OKRs here. We've got 4 different types or levels of OKR, and we've started, of course, with the customer, because everything we do in Lean and DevOps and value stream management is led by our focus on our customer. And if we elevate our customer and make our customer happy, everything else falls naturally into place. So example objectives that we might have for the customer are around things like value realization, the user experience, and then being delighted. So we can look for key results. These are our value outcomes, and we can try and measure these. And with key results, they should have specific quantified numbers on them. So we might be interested in the usage of an app or a particular feature within an app. We're very much interested in feedback, whether that gets to us as just a review or a score on Net Promoter Score, so an NPS, or whether there are referrals being made, or whether it's just an email for the customer services team. We're interested in all that kind of feedback. All of those feedback examples I just gave you tend to fall into the category of what we call unstructured data. Along with things like sentiment analysis, so things like people's comments on Twitter or Instagram, things like that. I mention that because it's a little bit more difficult sometimes to analyze unstructured data. We need different data models and data analysis tools, and we need data lakes over data warehouses and things like that in order to understand our unstructured data, particularly real time. And we do want our feedback to be real time. We want to be able to respond very, very quickly. And then we have some more technical metrics, which we can get from our APM tools, our RUM tools, potentially our AIOps tools. This is telling us what's actually happening within the system. So things like conversion rates, bounce rates, session lengths, so how long people are spending there. Things like customer journey time is there as well. And then also things like basket size. So these metrics aren't telling us how fast we're delivering to our customer. They're telling us how our customer is receiving what we have delivered to them. So we're trying to do 2 things at once here. We're trying to accelerate the rate at which we can give our customers the things that they need, and we're making sure that the customers are receiving the value from the things that they said they needed. And these should all be pull mechanisms. Again, this is a very lean way of thinking, that we pull work through our system as and when the customer demands it. We don't push work through at them. The other objectives and key results you can see on here are the business flow and team. So from a business perspective, we're mainly interested in profitability, market share, and segmentation and reach. So we can look at things like our income, percentage adoption of our products and services, and a customer churn and our conversion rates to help us out here. Then we've got our flow metrics again. So from a realization perspective, we're kind of not talking about that, we're talking about flow, but we're talking about days and hours and minutes in terms of how quickly we can get that to our people, efficiency, and our WIP. And then from a team perspective, we're talking about OKRs around our P&L. So this One, if you have a team managing their own profit and loss accounts, you've got a lot of autonomy in the organization. So you've succeeded in a key DevOps goal, which is about distributing authority and breaking the command and control hierarchical structure that most traditional organizations have. And you have team autonomy. And if the team is autonomous enough, they are probably capacity funded. So we know how much they're costing to run. And we'd normally do that on a monthly basis, because that's when we tend to pay people on a monthly basis. And that's not just the cost of the people, but we can also put in things like the cost of our software and hardware if we're using it, or of course cloud subscriptions if we're using that. You might want to also include budgets for learning and things like that. And then the profit is calculated from the income or the revenue from the product or service that that team has autonomy over, and the loss from that to give you the profit. So that helps us with total cost of ownership as well, and helps us understand our products and platform performance. So the team are going to be interested in things like their work in progress as a key result, of course, those finances, and then outcomes, so the value outcomes, and then things like capacity and uptime and mean time to discover and repair, and mean time between failures are the key results that we typically look for at the team level. So let's talk about how value stream management works in a bit more detail, and then we can see how we can leverage these metrics that we've talked about automatically. So a lot of people will have heard of things like value stream mapping, and value stream mapping is of course an extremely useful lean tool. It has some disadvantages though. One is that it's a very people-centric activity, which is also one of its advantages, because it helps us visually collaborate. It helps us bond and understand each other and learn empathy about each other's roles and each other's challenges. Helps us align, and it helps us create clarity around what we're trying to achieve. But it does require the human effort to make it happen. And it is quite opinion driven. It can be incredibly accurate. I've discovered in my own practice of value stream mapping, we've often spent a couple of days mapping things out in pieces and then come up with the final numbers, and they've been exactly as we have known from the systems at a very high level. But it does have some disadvantages, and value stream management is different from mapping. You can think of value stream mapping as a component part of what value stream management does. What we're going to look at here is the value cycle end to end. So remember, we're starting from idea and finishing at realization. So ideation to realization. So our ideas typically start and are measured and recorded in our product portfolios and our product backlogs. So that's where we set our visions and goals, and we align our epics and features and product backlog items like user stories, align them to our portfolio vision and goals. And then we move into thinking about actually doing the work, so actually creating the code. So we do that, we incorporate artifacts, and I use that sort of terminology because quite often now software is composed rather than coded, since there is so much out there already. Also seeing the increase of things like low code, no code systems. So that whole development world is under quite a lot of change. But we are, of course, doing things like controlling our versions, and we are hopefully building in a trunk-based manner, which means that we will be having all developers commit code at least daily to trunk, so that we can perform some automated tests on it, which takes us to the continuous testing piece. Typically on that continuous integration build, we'll be doing a unit test, an integration test, and a user acceptance test. So those are functional tests, but we should also be thinking about non-functional testing as well. So of course, things like security and performance. Once we are ready and our code is in a releasable state, we can deliver it whenever we want. That is continuous delivery. And we can do that using a manual button, or we can use full automation, which would be continuous deployment, which basically says once that that user story or feature has completed and passed all the checks that we put in place, it can automatically be deployed. Now it's in the hands of our customer, which is marvelous, but what we really want to know is it doing what we hoped it would do? Is our customer happy with it? So here our monitoring and observability kicks in DevOps, and we like to have telemetry everywhere, so it tells us not just what our systems are doing, but also what our customer experience is like. And then the cycle completes when we take that feedback and feed it back into our next iteration of work. So if the customer likes it, maybe we do more of it or build on that feature. If they don't like it, perhaps we pivot and try something else. So let's look at how the DevOps toolchain fits over this model. So first of all, we're going to start, so we're layering this on top of our value cycle we just looked at. So first of all, we've got our ideas coming through. So we're going to record them in our portfolio or backlog. So that could be something like Jira Align. We'll also probably be using Jira or something similar like Rally or version 1 or something to do task management and behave as our product backlog. And we may also have some kind of wiki where we keep further or deeper documentation about our product or service or value stream that we're working with. So those tools are all from Atlassian, so they integrate quite nicely, but life's not always that simple. Now we're starting to introduce some other parts that are going to help us do our continuous integration. So here we have an artifact repository. In this particular example, I'm using JFrog Artifactory, which is where we are going to store our binary artifacts. And then we're also going to be doing some version control. So here we just have some basic Git. Most version control is some flavor of Git, and we're probably going to implement a CI/CD server. In this particular case, GitLab, which will allow us to automate that build and coordinate those tests. So let's talk about those tests. We're going to do some unit testing. So in this case, NUnit, we're going to do some integration testing, so Jasmine, and we're going to do some user acceptance testing, so with Selenium. So we're now seeing our DevOps toolchain build, and we've already got 3, 6, 9 different tools in it from, about 7 different vendors, I think. So how are we going to trace that value from user story as it steps through all of these different tools and all these different things happen to it? I will explain in a moment, but let's talk about some more tests and things first. So we're still doing this DevOps toolchain, higher levels of capability. And I should say that not everybody, as they start on their DevOps journey, does do all the functional tests we've talked about. So it's quite common for people to be doing unit testing, but to not yet have got to integration testing or user acceptance testing an automated way. So don't panic if you are not there yet. Just keep on building and evolving your capability incrementally over time. And security testing is another one that often gets left later. And, we have a whole other subdomain of DevOps called DevSecOps, which is treating security specifically, because security often tends to get left behind. I recently had a conversation with one of the other ambassadors at DevOps Institute about SecDevOps as well. I'm a little bit dismissive of SecDevOps personally, because I think DevSecOps is sufficient, but there is an emerging discussion around that, and it's mainly led by people that are heavily security conscious. So people like departments of security for government, security organizations that may think that security has to come first before everything else, and that is their primary consideration. But for many organizations, security does tend to be left behind, and it is one of the last functional tests that get automated into a DevOps toolchain. And I haven't put performance testing in this particular example, but you could be putting something like JMeter in here as well. And we've also got orchestration tools here. We're looking at Ansible. And then this is where a lot of people often stop their DevOps toolchain, but I would encourage you to also think about your service desk. As I often say to people, we often fall into the trap in software delivery of thinking of our process more like a wedding than a marriage. So we often don't think about the fact that something is going to be out there for a really long time, hopefully being used, hopefully not creating technical debt. So here we've got a service desk tool represented as well, in this particular case, Zendesk. So yet another vendor here. And then we've got a monitoring tool, so we can have loads of these, and I've just got a few here. I've got Splunk for login and MuleSoft for AIOps and Grafana for dashboards, but the reality is that most organizations have a proliferation of monitoring tools, and in fact this is exactly what tools like MuleSoft are designed to help with. All of that noise that is coming from New Relic and Dynatrace and our network monitoring and our cloud monitoring and all these different monitoring tools that we have running at once. Trying to make sense of all of the alerts and things that are coming from them. So we've now got our end-to-end tool chain layered over our value stream, but this is complicated. There's a lot of tools and they're from a lot of different vendors and software providers. So actually understanding the flow of our value through our value stream as it ticks through is quite hard. And this is where our value stream management platform steps in to help us. So what it can do is it can fill these gaps or bridge these gaps that we've often had. So it connects our planning to delivery. It actually connects the whole way through, but planning and delivery was a particularly painful gap for a lot of organizations. It can really help us with dependencies. So you may have heard the DevOps mantra, don't manage dependencies, break them, which is absolutely a great thing to aim for. But the problem is that for a lot of organizations, they have a lot of dependencies right now. And again, we can't click our fingers and do everything overnight. It takes a while to build a DevOps tool chain. It takes a while to make applications loosely coupled. So it often requires some kind of re-architecture or rebuild to move from a monolith to microservices, which is one key way that we get dependencies. We also have dependencies a lot in organizational structures. And again, an organizational redesign does not happen overnight and they're often very disruptive. So actually to learn how to stop having delays and handoffs between teams as part dependencies also takes time. So while we're in transition from the old world to the new, so from waterfall to agile and DevOps, we often have to find ways to manage things as we fix them. And value stream management really helps us understand those cross dependencies and if we make one change in one value stream, how that's going to impact or how we need to involve another value stream. We can trace our user stories as they travel, so we can really learn lots about our cycle time and lots about where those constraints might be and those bottlenecks that are slowing us down. It can also help us understand our compliance. So we've got our tests, but we can see end to end very easily whether we are governing our value stream correctly. We can also gain insights, and this is where increasingly we're seeing artificial intelligence and AI being used alongside value stream management. So we're getting insights into waste and delays and bottlenecks and constraints. It's highlighting where things are getting slowed down, which gives us as humans the opportunity to inspect what's happening and make adaptations, so inspect and adapt in order to ultimately optimize that flow, so improve the way that feature or that work is getting into our customers' hands. And similarly, we can start using value stream management platforms to help us with value realization, so help us understand what's happening in our customers' hands. So value stream management may sound quite new to you, and it is. As I said, value streams and lean thinking and value stream management in the manufacturing and supply chain sectors have been around quite a long time, since the 1950s. We've been talking about lean across the enterprise since the 1990s, but what's different now is we're using value stream management in anger against our digital products, so against our software development and delivery. And we have these value stream management platforms that do what I just described in terms of helping us model the value streams and helping us connect all of our DevOps tool chain in order for us to extract those metrics and automate our value stream map for us. So this is relatively new. Forrester published their first wave of value stream management in 2018, and we didn't see a huge amount of research come out in 2019, but in 2020 we did see a lot coming out from all of the major research analysts. So of course Forrester, also Gartner, EMA, Research in Action, GigaOM, all produced reports in 2020. Forrester helpfully came up with a definition in their first wave that value stream management is a combination of people, process and technology that maps, optimizes, visualizes, measures and governs business value flow through heterogeneous software development pipelines from idea through development and into production. I prefer to say realization because that's where we really know that we've had an outcome. But you can see that value stream management software is pretty busy stuff. It's doing a lot more than just mapping. And here, of course, we're talking about the heterogeneous software delivery pipeline, which is our DevOps toolchain as well. So recognizing that one of the challenges with those toolchains is having all of the different tools there. You're also seeing the 14th State of Agile report here that was saying, this was from 2020, I think we're getting the 15th one quite soon, that 23% were interested, 15% were planning to implement, but 19 were currently implementing and 7 had implemented. So about a quarter of the market either implementing or had implemented. And some unsure people out there as well. Again, nearly a quarter, no, not interested or unsure about it. So that leaves about half sort of thinking about it. So as Gartner's Predicts 21 report that came out in 2020 said, by 2023, 70% of organizations will use value stream management to improve flow in the DevOps pipeline, leading to faster delivery of customer value. So if we've got 25%-ish, 26% doing it at the moment, we've still got quite a long way. So don't panic if you haven't done value stream or implemented value stream management yet. You have time and you're not being left behind, but you should probably think about doing it sooner rather than later. So other things the analysts are saying, as I said, we saw a lot of reports coming out in 2020. Gartner are recommending that people focus on value stream management to maximize flow and improve delivery efficiency and drive innovation. Research in action, value stream management is a must do, not a nice to do. So it's not optional. Forrester Wave have been surprised at how quickly it's been growing for them and their research. And again, EMA talking about that anticipated growth coming right now. So that's fabulous. We have looked at the DevOps metrics. We understand what a value stream is. We understand what flow metrics are. And we also understand the relationship between a value stream and its DevOps toolchain and how to leverage that DevOps toolchain to get the metrics that allow us to map and get insights and improvements. This is great, a great way to support your DevOps journey. But there are many, many aspects of a DevOps journey and in the implementation, you know, there's a huge swathe of DevOps principles and practices that need to be adopted in order to manage these new ways of working. So it's quite complex to do. So one of the best things that people can do to help themselves on this journey is use tools to understand where they are and how their journey is progressing. And value stream management can do some of that for us in terms of showing us things like our cycle time, in particular, but there are other things that you'll need to know, particularly around the human aspects, which I'll get onto in a minute. But one of the things that organizations can do is use an assessment tool. And assessment tools allow people to understand what their current state is. And the answer to where do I start with DevOps is always start where you are. It doesn't matter if you're completely greenfield, never heard of it, or you think you might have been doing some bits of it for quite a while, but haven't been calling that, or you've been doing DevOps for a while, but you want to accelerate it. You can start where you are with an assessment, but understand where you are. So baseline the current state, identify the next target state, and then these assessments will give you insights into how to prioritize the experiments to get in between the states, and you'll gain insights into how to improve each of these capabilities. And importantly, this allows you to measure your journey of improvement. So the ADOC, Assessment of DevOps Capabilities from DevOps Institute, has 5 dimensions, which are listed here. And we start with human aspects. This is so important to get the culture right and being able to adopt these ways of working and these technologies that drive different ways of working as well. Then we talk about process and frameworks. Of course, there are many, many other frameworks out there that are related to, rub up against, crossover DevOps. So we look at all of these and how they are related. And then in functional composition, we look at what we just looked at, basically that value life cycle, that value cycle that starts with idea and finishes with realization, and all the steps or processes that make up our value stream. And then the DevOps toolchain, so the intelligent automation piece. and then the place where our value streams are living and breathing, and that we are feeding them into and our customers are accessing from. So the technology ecosystem, so typically the cloud environments, or if you're still in data centers. So by using a capability assessment, we can measure those metrics. We use the DevOps metrics, the flow metrics, and other ways of measuring these capabilities over time and seeing how a DevOps journey progresses. So in summary, from a flow perspective, cycle time is to the value outcomes. So how long does it take your customer to realize and experience the value of the new feature that you provided them with? Getting those to them quickly is really key to customer delight. So the advice is to think and work as value streams and monitor from idea or ideation to realization. So the realization part really focus on those outcomes as well. So what was actually experienced by the customer. Figure out what value means to you, because it can mean very different things to very different organizations and businesses. But whatever it is, make sure that every time you do a piece of work, you hypothesize about what value that's going to bring, and you check. So be scientific about it and run experiments. And then a final word about joy, since it is my mission in life to bring joy to work. Your journeys can be measured, your DevOps journey and your progress can be measured. And when we make progress, it brings us joy. It makes us pleased to be alive. So DevOps also means sustainable ways of working. So it means avoiding burnout. It means finding ways of removing stress from the environment and releasing our creativity and our passion for learning. So these human aspects are really key to our success. So never, ever forget to think about the human. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you are enjoying the summit, and see you somewhere sometime soon.